Well, first I want to learn how you got here to AFI
Yeah.
from is did you come straight from Israel to AFI?
I did. It was an interesting kind of set of events. So I'll start by saying I got to AFI after already having worked in visual effects
Okay.
back in Israel. So by that point, I think I was at a company for about 3 years at a visual effects company in Israel, which I joined when I was like 21 or 22. So pretty, kind of fresh out of, in the case of Israel, it's not college or whatever, it's the army, right? So it's like I was in the army, out of the army, joined this company. And 3 years later, I decided I wanted to make films and to become a filmmaker. So I applied to a bunch of film schools and I got into one in Jerusalem. And I didn't get into AFI the first time I applied, but the second time I applied, which when I was already at the other film school, I did get in. Um, but was one of those, I don't know if you remember, like, we probably know that, right? But like some students get accepted, some students are on the waiting list.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was on a second waiting list that I wasn't aware of. So I was told originally no. And then about 3 weeks before class started, I got a phone call saying, "Oh, you were actually on a secret waiting list that only we knew about. So you're in. You want to come?" And like within 3 weeks, I had to like pack my life and move to LA, and that's how I got to AFI in LA.
Wait, and they knew that you live in Israel. That's a big
Yeah,
move in three
yeah,
weeks.
yeah, yeah. It's a big move. I have family in LA, and I when I grew up, I spent most of my summer vacations in the East Coast at my family's my uncle and aunts in Washington D.C. So it was culturally I was familiar with the U.S. And I've always planned on eventually making a move because if you're a filmmaker and you grew up on Hollywood films and everything, it's like that's the goal is to make films here.
Right.
Um, but when I applied to AFI, I also applied to the HFF, which is a film school in Berlin, and to the one in London. I forget what it's called, the Television and Film School, FTS, Film and
Yeah.
Television School.
Film of television. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So, so until I got to AFI, I was exploring other options and I, could have ended up in somewhere in Europe instead. And
But AFI was always number one.
yeah, AFI was always number one because it's in LA and because I mean, I really the only reason I knew about AFI is because my cousin from the East Coast used to be an usher at the Silver Theater, the AFI Silver Theater in Silver Springs, which completely coincidentally is where they're from. That they grew up in Silver Springs, and I spent all my summer vacations in Silver Springs, Maryland, which happens to be the East Coast branch of AFI.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so weird that we have that. It makes no sense.
yeah, right. It's like in the middle of nowhere, pretty much, but it's
I
like
heard it's like kind of a not the best neighborhood also.
no, I mean Silver Spring's kind of like, it's just it's a meh city. I don't know. It's not like
Yeah.
not a hub or anything like that. It's just there.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's an actual like movie theater that shows first run movies and they do retrospectives and things like that. But like every night, every day there's movies,
yeah,
like a regular movie theater that sells
it's a total
concessions and we run it. What? I've never been to it.
yeah, it's
It makes
weird.
no sense.
I mean, the
But
only
that's
reason
funny
I
that
know,
you
yeah,
found out about AFI through that theater.
through that theater because my cousin used to work there
Yeah.
completely randomly. And then I come here and I'm like, oh, this place is actually well known. Like globally, people know about AFI.
Yeah.
It's like one of the film schools.
Wait, like
Totally.
USC, UCLA, they weren't on your radar. Also in LA.
They were one of the reasons I didn't like aim for them is because I wanted to kind of skip the whole bachelor degree thing or like the whole kind of undergrad
Yeah.
phase of it because I've already been, I was like 25 at the time and I didn't kind of didn't want that type of experience. I felt kind of it's over that. I just wanted to go straight to business and to learn how to make films and do and actually and I was looking for a very practical program
Yeah.
to like get into there and like actually go on productions as soon as we kind of hit the ground running and the other programs just felt like it would take a while and be more like kind of a little less intense and I wanted something intense.
Yeah. And did it live up to your expectations?
100%. I mean, 100%. And I really enjoyed the film school that I went to before AFI in Jerusalem, which is also a very intense and practical, like hands-on film school. But in a way, AFI was like the perfect sort of complement to that film school because that's more of a European sort of auteur type thing where it's more like you do everything and everybody kind of plays to your beat or whatever. And AFI is more about being collaborative and understanding that other people around you have needs and you shouldn't be touching the camera because that's the camera department's responsibility and the editor edits and the screenwriter writes and
Yeah.
you're just the director. It was kind of an interesting sort of exactly the sort of other way to look at things.
Yeah.
Which coming out of Jerusalem, if I just landed here and I thought I was going to just start making films the way I was used to back there, I would have been really, out of my element because it is very collaborative here. And, it's one of the things that I like about the way things are being done here is that there's this whole respect for other people's, ownership of their own discipline and this sense of like, oh, I trust you, you know what you're doing, someone
Yeah.
who
And
went
then,
through.
that they can add something to your vision, right?
Exactly,
Through
yeah.
their skill set, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And AFI was all about, like, for me, the experience of AFI was all about that friction between you knowing what you want and having the vision, but then letting go and seeing what other people, bring to the table, but then not shutting them down,
Hmm.
uh, while still somehow kind of steering them towards that vision that you once had. And then throughout the process, also trying to make something that's better than your original vision and like get the best out of all the departments. And I can tell you, it was hard. It was like the biggest challenge of AFI was, and I failed at this so many times, right? During my years as a student, every cycle kind of sort of challenged me in a new way. Once I've learned something from this cycle, and then I've completely crashed in a different way in the next cycle, and then all the way up to my thesis film, which was also kind of a disaster. No, I mean not the final result. The final result ended up
Yeah.
being pretty good, but like getting there was very challenging and there was a lot of a lot of tension, a lot of friction between the teammates and different opinions and then I came out of there with all that experience and all that sort of all those scars. And when I was finally on my own or on a real shoot and working with, with other people, I really feel like that all kind of contributed to me being much more um, just relaxed, kind of willing to participate, willing to absorb, to see what other people have to say, but still confident enough to, to move things around and to own up to my part of the crew and or my role as a director and kind of being both respectful but opinionated and the
Yeah.
most important thing is like to get to give people the sense that you know what you want and you're kind of on top of your part of it, but you're also very attentive and open to other people's creativity and goals and just kind of incorporate everything and try to
Yeah.
merge everything into doing something that's good, that's like better than the sum of its parts, right? So
Right. What you were describing when you were talking about how you got your scars at AFI is like the ideal version of an experience. I'll just say AFI experience, but like a film
mhm.
school experience too. But since I know AFI the best, it's like that's what we want you to do. We want you to fail each time and then hopefully try something new. You fail, you learn from that. You don't just do the same thing because you've already learned it. So then you try something new and fail at that, and it's a safe space to do it. It sometimes doesn't feel safe because you're getting critiqued and torn apart by your classmates and your peers, right? But let's talk about that. Talk about getting critiques. Well, you went to film school. Was the Jerusalem film school like that? Did you have to critique each other?
Oh yeah, and in Israel it's brutal. It's like way more brutal than in LA. People don't have there is no translation to sugarcoating in Hebrew.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, just having known so many Israelis through mainly through AFI,
yeah.
very blunt, and I love it. Like you know exactly where you stand with people. It's great.
Yeah, you can call out an Israeli in the crowd, but just seeing how blunt they are and like how just straight to business they are.
So did you think
Uh,
that AFI was like a little soft? Like, come on, give me the real deal.
in a way it was, and also I I don't know, I was born with a thicker skin, I think, than most, so I've never had any issue with critique.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, it's not fun to hear, to get, to hear people don't like what I'm doing, but it never really been like a big disruptive element in my own sort of, I don't know, self-esteem or something like that.
yeah,
Um, so in that regard, I'm always in a position where like, yeah, just lay it on me. The more the better. Just like, and the film that I've later talk about, a film that I've directed, and I got a ton of like really bad, reviews on it, which I love. I love reading them and like going through them, and the more, people, the longer they are and the more, vicious they are, the happier I am, because like someone actually spent time to write this thing. Like
yeah.
they
I mean,
hate
that's what
it,
you
but
want as a filmmaker. You want like a strong reaction to your work where they love it
yeah,
or hate it. You don't want middle of the road.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if you hate it, at least it's bad enough for you to spend that much time writing a
Yeah.
review.
I
Like,
love reading bad reviews. I mean, not when it's someone that I know. I don't want to feel bad for them, but a
right,
bad review of a movie because critics get so creative in their writing and they're fun.
right. Yeah, they come up with some pretty funny things. But yeah, so if I was it wasn't, I don't think it was too soft. I thought the teachers are great. And that's what made them so great is that they were very honest and I wouldn't say brutal, but they weren't like being softies or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you had
so
Peter
I like that.
Markham, who he could be tough, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
Rob Spira, which I'm actually taking his master class right now.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Rob Spira. That is a
yeah, yeah, he
trial by
definitely,
fire. That's a badge of honor to get through. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um,
You're doing his class right now. That's awesome.
yeah, I went back. A few of my classmates are actually doing some workshops with him now.
Great. Well,
He's
he's your
always
neighbor in
good.
North Hall or Valley Village area. Yeah.
He might be. I think
I think
I
he's
don't
right
know.
there.
It's not. It's a Zoom class anyway. But yeah,
Ah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of the greats. Yeah. I
yeah.
love him. So what
And
was the big what was the hardest part about adapting to uh Los Angeles and AFI?
I think it's definitely the fact that I was just being as blunt as I'm always am, and I didn't realize how poorly it would be received by my classmates,
Mm,
by some of them. And so I think, and I'm in Israel, I'm considered very soft spoken and like, nice, and like, because I'm the guy that spent his summers in the States, and I have a
right.
little bit of that culture kind of embedded in me, and my grandparents and parents are from Europe, so I'm kind of like more European, a little bit less sabra, like kind of Israeli, thorny Israeli Jew. But here I was definitely considered kind of thorny, and without, I just that was one of the things that really were hard, because I'm not used to being perceived that way, and I didn't even realize I was perceived that way, because Americans are not going to tell you that in the face. And it was kind of like it was a process. It took time for me to even realize that this was my impression that I was leaving behind me, right?
Yeah.
It's like almost halfway into first year, I was like, oh my God, am I a bully? Do people think I'm like what do people think of me, right? And
So
by the
so did
time
someone tell you? Did someone say, "Hey, you're coming off pretty strong"?
I had a classmate that was actually one of my first cycle collaborators, who I later found out wrote about his experience working with me on social media on Facebook. And
Whoa.
yeah, and I guess back then it was like, no, we weren't all, each other's friends on Facebook. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
as common as it is now. So it took a while for me to even discover that. But like, and I started getting the sense that maybe someone said something about me behind my back, because some people that I, reached out to, like maybe to work with on cycle 2, seemed a bit hesitant. And I was like, what's wrong? Like, And and later on that same person wrote stuff about other people too. And like, and then you're like, okay, well, there's a pattern here, and that
Yeah.
not I'm not, specifically the culprit. And also other people that I think later on through the years, some of the people that seemed hesitant originally became really good friends of mine. And then they were like, oh, we heard this thing about you. And like, that's totally not true or whatever. It was like, it was very weird because now that we know you, we know that it's, um, it wasn't a great representation or whatever, but definitely not accurate. Um, but that does, it has an effect. And one of the things that, you mentioned that AFI is a place for people to brush up, to harden and to learn through mistakes. I agree with that, but there's also this expectations of people that go to AFI that maybe I'm going to be like leaving AFI with an Academy Award winning short or something like that that's going to like kickstart my career. So there is an expectation still to like create quality work that could jumpstart your career later on. It's not just about, homework and, getting a grade at the end of the 2 years and whatnot, right? So it can make or break someone's sort of career. Of course, later on when you're like out of it, you realize, well, it's just 2 years. There's so much that can happen afterwards or whatever. It's like nothing is
Right. Yeah,
every
we're
person.
always fighting against that. The pressure and the pressure that the fellows put on themselves for that.
Right.
Like that their thesis film is their one chance to make it. It's their one chance to show what they can do. And
Exactly.
they have to put everything in it. And it's just like creates so much anxiety. And it's, you really have to think of it as, yeah, obviously always do your best work, but it's one of many things you're going to make. I
Right.
always, I think of Ari Aster, because he's like the more recent like
Oh
blockbuster
yeah,
success.
of course.
After AFI, he made like 6 shorts before he made Hereditary, right?
Yeah, I know. I was actually he reached out to me to help him with VFX for one of them for the forget one, which one, but yeah, he was a year above me, so
Oh, cool.
I saw his thesis in one of the pre-screenings or whatever. The uh,
What
very
was your
interesting
reaction to
short.
that thesis?
I
That thing's
keep
infamous.
wanting to watch it again. It's such a sick, he has such a sick mind, that guy.
It's one of the few that has gone viral. It's like on YouTube, and then there are reaction videos to people watching it and
Oh,
then
great. Yeah,
reacting to the moments that are shocking.
every now and then, and just randomly, I'm like, I gotta watch What's Wrong with the Johnson again, right? I gotta check. I wonder if it's on YouTube, but like I never actually go to it. So now that you mention it, it's actually on there. I'll definitely
You
check it
should.
out because it's
You
been a
should.
while. It's like one of those things. It's like I know this movie was just so weird, and I remember generally like kind of the log line, but I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly how it unfolded. I'm sure it's brilliant because it's all everything he did was brilliant back from then. It's like one of those things where like the guy has a voice from day
Yeah.
one. That
Yeah. I know it's very rare when you see that from the start. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Uh,
let's talk about your thesis film because you alluded to it being, well, you used the word disaster, but not the end result wasn't a disaster. But like
yeah.
what happened in the making of it?
Well, so the I'll start by saying I was one of the last thesis films to like be scheduled to shoot, like, towards the end of second year. And the way AFI works is you team up for that second year project pretty early, like at the end of first year, which is not early at all if you're one of the first groups to go out and shoot. But it's pretty early if you're one of the last ones. It's almost like a year
It's
out.
a year of just thinking about one short film.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, it was way too much. It was like kind of the opposite of being accepted to AFI 3 weeks before school starts and just kind of not having to think about it and just packing and going. um which it's stressful, but at the same time you don't have 6 months to like think about wrapping up your life, not being able to start new things, all those things that to me, if I were accepted to AFI, you know where when I when other people got accepted, I would probably not know what to do with myself half of the time, right? Because it's like
Oh yeah.
it take that long to kind of wrap everything up and do, and like you're kind of like you're afraid to start new things. And I would have probably gotten a lot less out of my second year at that film school, knowing that I'm going to leave anyway. So it's like to
Yeah.
me, actually, knowing getting that kind of heads up later on makes a lot of sense. So in a way, my thesis project from the get-go, just because it was so far out, from being having teamed up. was like already kind of a disaster in the making, because what am I going to do for like 10 months, with this thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, the other problem, or the other challenge, was that we teamed up around a script that I didn't write.
Ah,
In a way, it was a script that chose me more than the script that I chose, and it chose me because it was a sci-fi script that one of the cinematographers in our year wrote. Um,
cinematographer got greenlit. Wow.
yeah, cinematographer.
Rare.
And it was a super ambitious. It was a 30-page script, so way longer than AFI needs to be. And in those 30 pages, it was almost like 3 acts of 3 different movies. Um, and it was great, but it was again kind of disjointed and super
Yeah.
ambitious with like visual effects. And everybody was like, "This is the script David has to make because I'm the visual effects guy."
Oh,
You
yeah,
know, so
that's a question. Because were you that guy like all throughout AFI, like in cycles and everything? Like,
yeah, I've always, because I know how to do visual effects, a lot of times I chose subjects or films that I knew I could use a little bit of them in there, just peppered in.
yeah,
I never like went really big because because I also know how long it takes to make visual effects. So I
right.
know what not to do, and I didn't want to spend all my year just, in a computer.
Yeah,
Um, but I utilized VFX, and then some of my classmates knew or saw that and asked me to help them out with their cycles or thesis films. So I was always the guy that, very early on people kind of got, got gotten up to it or whatever, like caught up
yeah.
on it and ended up asking me to help. So yeah, I definitely became that guy. And when this thesis script kind of, bleeped on the radar, I was immediately the person everybody's like, "Oh, of course, this is the script for you, Dave. Like nobody else can make this, so obviously you go ahead and do it."
Were you
Uh,
always okay with that though, or were you ever like, hey, I don't want to be known as the VFX guy. I want to make a movie about two people sitting in a diner booth, like
oh, I definitely prefer to make that. I definitely
yeah,
wanted to make a non VFX film.
yeah,
Uh, Again, for the same reasons. I didn't want to spend, half a year in front of a computer rendering shots.
right.
I wanted to finish something up and be done, and I also felt like I wanted to invest the energy in other things that I'm more challenged by, like, working with actors and editing and, you know, making a strong story that stands on its own right and not doesn't need like the support of visual effects or anything like that.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was almost like, well, here's what I wanted, and like this script came, and everybody was like, oh, you should go there, and I kind of like got,
Mm.
pushed over that. And my scripts weren't greenlit, like the ones that I submitted. Um, and so I was kind of locked into either doing that or doing something else that I didn't write. And this one was also clearly not producible at 30 pages, so I knew I would have to like rewrite it. So I was like, okay, well, given that I need to rewrite it anyway, I could, kind of strip it down and make it a little bit more manageable, and like maybe do something more, could still be sci-fi, but something more on Earth. But the problem was that just like me, all my other teammates in the thesis, they all had ideas of where they wanted to take this film once it's being rewritten. And some of them, leaned into certain parts of the original script, and others leaned into others. And it turned out into this kind of impossible blunder of like trying to keep everybody happy, not change it so much that people start losing their interest in this one particular story. Um, and then we had 10 months of that, 10 months of basically reworking, workshopping, sending it. And because we had so much time, my teammates were perfectly fine, sending me off in a new direction, or like, saying, we don't like this, just write something else. There's 6 more months to go, this time. So let's figure it out. We're not in a rush. So I was basically kind of back and forth trying to find something, and also trying to find something that I can kind of connect to by myself.
Yeah.
And um, long story short, we got to about, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks out without a script that I that I felt like I'm ready to direct. There was something that I kind of half co-wrote with a producer that I ended up just kind of hating myself and saying, okay, I just can't do this. It's not going to be, I can't see myself going and shooting this because I just don't believe in it. I feel like I kind of, I was manipulated by the energies of like kind of collaboration into this sort of script that I'm not happy with. And we ended up going to one of our screenwriting fellows, Joe Aaron, who's a little bit older and
I
kind of
remember
was
him. Yeah,
considered this wise,
the silver fox,
very,
right? He always had the gray hair and the
yeah,
glasses. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And and he just finished helping some other thesis films with their screenplays. He was kind of like the angel savior of a lot of groups that kind of
The
fell out of
thesis
whack or
whisperer.
whatever. Yeah, the
Yeah,
thesis whisper, and kind of everything lined up so that exactly like 3 weeks before we were supposed to go shoot, he became available and was like, "Yeah, I'll help you guys." And I made a kind of a deal with all my classmates. No matter what this guy writes, that's what we're shooting. So no
really.
notes, just whatever he
Wait,
writes.
and were you all agreeing on a story, or is just like whatever you come
Well,
up with?
we already had a location. I think we might even had some actors cast by that point. Um, like we knew
It's like a
we
game
had a
of it's like those, yeah.
we
Here are
had a
these elements. Now
skeleton.
make a story out of it. Yeah.
Exactly. There was some kind of skeleton, not a plot skeleton, but like there was a location, it was a spaceship or some sort of spaceship. We could kind of we had, two actors. We're like, all right, we're gonna spend 6 days on this stage. Let's figure out what we can do with it. And Joe came and kind of hashed this pretty basic and a little cliche plot, but like it worked because it just had a beginning, middle, and end,
Yep.
and he's a great writer, so he was very kind of quick and nimble and wrote something that sort of felt very Hollywoody and sort of your kind of 80s sci-fi concept, and then we went to shoot and it was fun. And I the moment the camera started rolling, all the tension and grief and whatever baggage we had between us as a team, it all kind of dissipated. We were all just kind of having each other's back, and the experience was pretty good on set, and directing the scenes was fun, and the actors were great, and um, everything kind of came together at the literally in real time while we were on set. And
Yeah.
and the script was whatever we could come up with, or Joe could come up with, kind of to save us in the last minute. So it wasn't like, you know, it's not an Oscar winning short film, but it did become a pretty good showcase of like my abilities, both as a director and as a visual effects, as a visionary, because the script or the film did end up having some spectacle element in it. It's
Yeah.
uh it's a science fiction. It takes place on a different planet in a submarine. It features two different like space vehicles and a lot of underwater submersible sequences and some action. Um,
Yeah, I remember it. Europa is called. I just
yeah,
remember the like it just not feeling like any other thesis I'd ever seen, right? Because it had so much
yeah,
like scope and like ambition and
exactly.
and like professional level like visual effects. There wasn't anything that felt cheap or took you out of it. It was just like,
Yeah,
what?
thank
This
you.
is a thesis film? Yeah.
I know it took a while. It ended up taking about half a year to get, of me sitting in front of the computer and cursing, every moment of it and like kind of being, I can't believe I ended up in this exact place that I told myself this whole time that I'm trying to avoid being at. Um,
That's you by yourself doing it all, like rendering it
I
all.
did most, yeah. I mean, all the shot work was all me. I had some friends helping me design some of the ships, and some of the environments, but it all kind of ended up kind of coming together on my computer. I did everything in terms of the compositing and the kind of the majority of the work. The irony is that the film that actually got me to sign with managers and to get some, general meetings around town was not Europa. It was the film that I did between first and second year at AFI, completely out of extracurriculum. I did a short film called Secular Quarter 3, which was basically I entered into some kind of a contest, short film contest, and I won first place. That also had a little bit of sci-fi and a little bit of visual effects in it. It was way shorter. It was 2.5 minutes, I think.
2.5 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, and it just won this contest. It was like organized by the city of Jerusalem, sci-fi short film contest organized by the city of Jerusalem. So kind of an uh, interesting endeavor that they cooked up, and they had a pretty strong PR, you know, um, effort into kind of like just plugging this everywhere. And they had John Lando, the producer of Avatar. He was one
Yeah,
of the
Cameron's producer. Yeah.
yeah, he was one of the judges, and then a bunch of others. And so like that kind of brought a little bit of hype and sort of star power into the whole thing. And he picked my film as the you know winner. Um, and that got me more attention, way more attention than my thesis film.
So that was between first and second year.
Yeah, that I mean, so when it came out, it was in the middle of second year. So before I shot Europa. In fact, it was like so it started have it created this sort of beginning of how it is like when the heat starts, right? And you kind of like as the filmmaker inside of it, you start feeling like, oh, maybe something's gonna happen. I might get some opportunities. I should be
Yeah.
prepared and all. And that was in the middle, or like kind of leading up to me prepping Europa. So there was a moment there where I was like, maybe I don't need Europa. Like maybe we just call it quits,
Let's
like
just call it a day, AFI.
oh, today fine. Like maybe I'm good. Like, because I knew it was gonna be hell, leading up to Europa. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
what you said, it did a lot for you. It eventually led to a manager, like got you meetings and
got me meetings, got me management, got me and then I found out that it's not enough just to get a
then they
manager.
want you to have material, right?
Then they want me to have material. I was like, okay, well, I gotta finish this Europa thing, but I'll have that to show.
Were you developing a feature when you were at AFI?
I did not have to. I don't think it was definitely not a like built-in part of the curriculum. Like,
No, I think it was a what's alternative, what's it called? Anyway, it was a class that you could take if you wanted to. It was the
yeah,
development
I mean,
workshop.
I
Yeah.
think I did. I think we did develop a feature, and it was one of those things where I couldn't decide. I mean, I think I worked on one thing, and then at some point I was like, I don't want to work on it anymore. I
Yeah.
felt like it was
Yeah.
kind of because I had an idea for a feature that I ended up making my cycle two, I think, based on in first year. And after I made cycle two, I kind of felt like I'm done with this, story. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel like I want to further, go into exploring it further as a feature.
Yeah.
But then I didn't come up with anything that took its place. I had a few things that I've developed or that I so when people ask me for material, I had stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't have a full-fledged like written feature, but I had concepts and
You had
and
ideas.
log
Did
line.
you have you always considered yourself a writer?
No, no. I think that I always understood that like being a director and being a writer are kind of hand in hand. There you have to know how to write and be able to appreciate good writing and to analyze good writing. And ideally also be able to write good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but the more and I have a lot of writer friends who have made careers out of it and have been successful, but I know that they're just made out of a different material than me. It's like someone said, like being a writer is someone that chooses to do homework for the rest of their lives. And I was like, I didn't even do homework when I was at school. It's like I was never the homework guy. I was the guy that like comes in last minute and just kind of wings it and uses logic and just kind of gets. Then
Yeah.
I get just enough. I just get high enough grades to pass, and that's good
Yeah.
enough, right?
It's like
Um,
homework is like studying. You're like it's like practicing. You're like, I'd rather be doing it rather than, practicing doing it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and writing is just like standing in front of a blank page is really scary, because everywhere you go, it's a decision, and I hate making like these because then you make a decision, but you have to all the subsequent decisions are based on that initial decision. And I'm one of the people that was like, if I make five, if I get to decision number five and I feel like I don't want to make that decision, I'm like, well, maybe I should have taken a different decision. Like maybe
You,
number one was the one that I should have like
you question all your
reconsidered.
decisions. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
that just spirals. And you don't get anywhere. I get it.
Yeah. So I feel like that's why I'm like, I'm probably not the guy to write stories because I can't really fall in love with my own ideas as much.
Yeah.
Uh, not to say I have written one feature when I was at AFI. Like I ended up kind of writing the whole kind of 90, 100 page draft one, and then I never read it because I was like, I just know what's awaiting for me. If I went back and read it, I'd be like, so, I just lose all interest. So I just lost interest anyway. Or
I
if like,
but I think there's a misconception that like directors, especially young directors, they feel like they have to be auteurs, right? They have to write and direct everything. It's like
right.
99% of the filmmakers here at AFI right now think that. But when you look at professional filmmakers, how many of them are actually, the ones they admire, how many of them are actually writing their scripts? Steven Spielberg, how many scripts has he written of his
Yeah,
movies?
not that many.
Maybe
Right.
one and a half, I think, you
Yeah.
know?
I think you have to have the confidence to know good writing if you see it, so that you can also, rely on other people. Like a lot of, the famous quotes in Spielberg movies are famously not weren't in the script. They came from like conversations on set and suggestions and stuff like that.
Right.
I have actor friends who were in Spielberg movies, and they, from firsthand, kind of, you know, experience, they told me, yeah, like this line that I said in that movie, we it was just something that we came up during rehearsal, and he passed by us and we were like, hey, check this out. And he was like, okay, great, that's in the movie, right? So you got to have that, confidence, and also allowance, I guess, from production, or like to kind of trust
Yeah.
from production to be like, oh, you're going to change the script? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
Well, and when you're Steven Spielberg, you can do that. You don't even have
exactly,
to
right?
ask.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, you don't ask anybody. It's like, I'm changing
Yeah.
it. But
There's something to that though, like true confidence. I was talking to someone about this the other day. Like real confidence, it's not just like I know everything, everybody just like do what I say. True confidence is being able to take other people's ideas in and being open to those ideas
yeah,
and being open to changing your vision, right? Because maybe
yeah,
there's a better idea, right? True confidence is not being afraid of testing your ideas.
yeah. I think that's a huge thing, and very, and the other thing is creating around you the atmosphere and environment that empowers people, even in the lowest, ranks, to
Yes.
feel free to, to come up with those things and to suggest them, right? Because a lot of people, if you're just constantly sort of like creating this atmosphere of fear around you, or this like kind of, I absolutely know everything and I don't need anybody's help, then nobody's going to come to you with suggestions. They'll be like, well, I better watch out. I don't want to, overstep my place. And I think that's one of the things that I've always been, when I was on set as a director, I always try to kind of disarm uh people around me, and so that they feel comfortable, like coming up with suggestions. I remember one example was on my feature film. We had a scene that featured I don't know if you've seen my reel, but it's on my reel, where a car is like teetering on the edge of a cliff. It's kind of like
Yeah. Yeah. I was
falling
just the
apart.
one you said just sent me. I was watching
So
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of towards the end there. Um, and we were like, okay, so, and one of those things was like, it was in the script, and my producers had no idea how to actually shoot this. It was like, how do we, how are you going to shoot it? We're just going to have a car and you're going to put a green on it. Because I'm the VFX guy. So they're like, you're going to figure it out. But I'm like, yeah, but in order for that to work, I actually need someone dangling under the car. Means the car, I need at least 8 feet under the car. How is going to, I can't, make someone look like he's dangling. It has to, has to be someone actually hanging on from the front of a car.
Yeah.
Um, and then you're starting to think, I don't know, is it like, are we gonna put it on the car on some kind of on a 2-story garage or whatever, and like, at the edge, or how do we do that? How do we get the car up high enough to be able to do that? And and we were thinking about it, and then I think the next morning or something, the office PA, we were having a, meeting in the morning. She's like, on the way here, uh, I was stuck in traffic, and I was looking up, and what I see is like this huge car just hanging above my car, because it was basically being towed by a big, 2-story kind of two double-decker tower, like a
Yeah.
car carrier, right? A truck. And we're like, well, renting a truck like that shouldn't cost that much. It's like probably a couple $100, just to, because they use it all the time to transport things, and so I
Yeah.
ended up just renting a truck like that for a day. It didn't cost that much at all. And that gave us exactly what we needed. So we were able to like kind of rig the car to the back of it. And it even had this like hydraulic thing where it actually goes up and down a little bit. So we could get exactly the angle we needed. And it just worked perfectly for what we needed. but it's one of those things like, any other, in other scenarios, a PA like that could be like, oh, I'm going to suggest that. I'm going to think I'm dumb or something like that or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah. That's great that you actually use it, man. That's really cool. Wait,
yeah.
so okay, so walk us through like how I assume like these manager that you got and from that 2.5 minute film that led to this feature that you made.
You'd think, but it didn't.
You'd
In
think, but
fact,
it didn't. Yeah.
in fact, this manager, I sent her a bunch of material and she went through it and gave some notes, and it's kind of like things just started sort of to dissipate. The heat eventually cools off. Uh,
It cools
Nothing
off
that
fast. It cools off
very
fast.
yeah, pretty fast, and nothing that I had kind of ready. I didn't have anything ready. I had also meeting, by the way, not just with managers but with producers, working producers who, Oscar winning producers, about projects.
Hmm.
I should say not about projects, general meetings where they told me that I'm more than welcome to send, material. And I was like, that sounds like an amazing opportunity, and I should definitely sit on my ass and like come up with some great material, right? But it's like it just doesn't work that way. I just didn't really have material, or I didn't feel like it was great enough to share. And then and then I was like, okay, I'll just wait until I have material and then I'll send it. And it's been how many years now? Anyway, uh, so this opportunity came through a friend of mine who I've met on Martin, who is another AFI classmate of mine, the director.
Martin Anderson.
Martin Anderson, yeah, he directed I'm not sure he wants me to even mention that film, but he directed an asylum film, super low budget. It was a horror film. I think it's actually pretty good. But it was done on no budget, no time. Um, and he called me to be second unit on that film because he felt like he wouldn't be able to complete the shooting the feature in 6 days.
Hmm.
I came and I took over all the scenes he wanted me to take over and then some, because he just was so behind schedule that he just
He
had
was
to.
wait, he was making a feature in 6 days.
Yeah, he was making a feature in 6 days. It was a found footage
Oh,
movie,
wow.
so it's all kind of handheld cameras, so not so much time went for lighting and things like that. But it was
Yeah.
a horror film, and it was a pre-elaborate script. Um, we shot it in this abandoned hospital, which I don't think is being used anymore for filming, but it was back then. It was kind of the go-to, or haunted hospital in East LA or whatever, by the LA River. And and in that film, I've met the producer and the writer. They're a couple. They're like partners, and I befriended them, and then they ended up getting this opportunity to produce this earthquake movie, which was also low budget, but a little bit more than what he had, and a little bit more than 6 days. It was a 16-day shoot, about 500, $600,000 budget. Um,
That's pretty big actually for a Mar Vista movie.
yeah, I still think it's one of their only, or most successful, or disaster movies that they've
Yeah.
done for ever in their roster. And yeah, I think originally the person who was supposed to direct it was the guy who did Sharknado, and
Okay.
then he ended up bailing or leaving because he got Sharknado 2 was lined up or whatever, so he
Yeah.
couldn't do it anymore. And they're friends of mine, and the writer Steve, invited me for beers, and we talked, and he was like, "Hey, what you're a director, right? Like, what are you doing in February? Do you want to help us out, right?"
You
And
want
I
to help
sent
us out?
well, it was like, why don't you send us your reel, because you're a director, visual effects, and this movie is kind of
Yeah.
big and it has some visual effects in it. So I sent a reel that included Europa, and I think that was a big part of why they chose me, because they saw Europa and they saw some other things. And the reel went far enough as to get me greenlit by the studio, by Mar Vista,
Just
and get me.
greenlit? You didn't have to like go in and pitch on it or anything like
No,
that?
I didn't have to pitch on it.
Wow.
I had one meeting with some executive there that I've never met ever since. It was just like, hey, you have a pulse. Great. He told me one thing about TV movies versus theatricals. which is to put all my to put more energy in the opening scene than in the finale, because he said in theatricals, what's important is how people kind of experience it going out of the movies, like what they're left with, so that they, word of mouth, and they tell people about it and everything. But in TV, it's just, having, drawing them in and making sure that they stay as long as possible, so that they,
Yeah.
go through the commercial break or whatever, so they come
Yeah.
back. So
That
most
hasn't
of
changed now, with streamers, like they're even with like big time directors will say like, yeah, they kind of forced me to put like an action scene in towards the beginning to feed the
right.
algorithm to get people hooked on it. And I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's the same.
but it's like, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm
no, it totally
not
does. Were
cynical
there
about
any
it.
other rules like oh like lots of close-ups because it's TV or
No, I think in that regard, they were pretty relaxed about the way I chose to do it. I didn't get any notes. I had a lot of wider shots, not so much close-ups.
good?
I was pretty much kind of given a free rein to design the scenes the way I wanted. Nobody forced me into any specific angles or something. In that regard, it was a really great experience. I mean, this film was really, I really felt like um, I was really taken care of well by the producers. It was a very ambitious film, and I was the first person to be like, "Can we even do this thing?" It seems like we're trying to
Yeah.
bite more than we can chew. And in fact, I was also concerned about the visual effects, because I was not the person that's going to do the visual effects. And
Ah,
the company, the Mar Vista, had a deal with a VFX company, and that company, Encore VFX, which is a great company. They have branches in LA and in Vancouver, and happened to be the Vancouver branch that was working on our film. But they kind of left us without much input and without much knowledge about what we should or shouldn't do. Um, the little information that they did give us was not very helpful, because it felt like it was a beginning of a conversation, not a conclusion. But that conversation never continued in before we went to shoot. So in a way, we're like, well, we know what they would want us to do, but we can't really work that out. So we'll just shoot whatever we can, and we'll figure it out later, which is what happened. Um, Complete opposite of the way I would want to work as a VFX supervisor. Um, and the way I do work as a VFX, like for me, now that I'm a VFX supervisor working with other directors, I will chase them and get, until I have a shot list of every single thing they want to do.
hmm
And I will be like, if there's any concern that I have, they're gonna hear about it, whether they want to or not. I'm gonna wake him up in the middle of the night and just tell him like, hey, that thing, let's make sure that you know what you want, and that we get it right, because I don't want to be telling you on the day that this is something, that we can't do or something. I just want to
right.
make sure every problem gets solved you know, before we were on the day, and we were wasting millions, not millions, but like tens of thousands an
A lot
hour.
of money.
Um,
Yeah, I want to get more into like what
yeah.
you do as a visual effects producer, but I'm also very curious about like this first feature. It sounds like weren't like you were very relaxed going into a feature film. Like,
It was a weird thing. I guess, I mean, trying to think, what is it that why am I have I been so relaxed? I've generally been pretty relaxed in situations where other people would probably be very, like, getting uh anxiety attacks.
is that how you are like when people are freaking out like on set? Does that then you get super
Yeah,
stoic and calm? Yeah,
yeah. And like,
it's you know what? You're exactly what people need.
I think so. I mean, I definitely, in that film specifically, I definitely was the right person, in many situations where there were like things just felt like they're falling apart, and everybody was like freaking out. And I was like, okay, let's relax. Wait, we'll figure it out. There's a way
Yeah,
out.
we're making a movie
Uh,
here. Come on.
yeah. And I think it's like, it's almost like my brain does this 180, like, almost consciously. It's like, okay, now is the time that everybody is gonna freak out. It's not going to help, right? So it's freaking out. It's not going to help.
Yeah,
Let's put that option off the table, right? Like that freaking out part, like not a, because I already know where that leads. It's like
Yeah.
nowhere good, right? So it's like let's just avoid that.
There are
It's
no
not that I
solutions
don't.
down that
It's not
road.
that I've
Yeah.
never gotten. I mean, I have gotten anxiety attacks. I usually get the anxiety attacks, like if I think I had like one or two of those. Like, I definitely had a few more when I was working on Europa, but it was not when we were shooting. It was not even the night before we were shooting. It was like I slept well that night. It was like weeks before when I was like just tons of options and like dilemmas and decisions to be made and people to soothe or to
Yeah.
just that kind of that's where I was like really drowning in like uncertainty and how am I get out of this, and I have 4 more months of this shit, like
Yeah. That's
sorry
it
about
comes from uncertainty. Like when you're in
yeah,
production, you know what you're shooting the next day.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's uncertainty on the day, um like there was one night where the next morning we had a scene with a helicopter, and I never got a clear answer on what model helicopter we're actually going to get on the day. And that scene had 7 people that had to be on the helicopter when it takes off, right? So obviously, movie magic, the people are not going to be on the helicopter when it actually takes off. But we had a scene of them like sitting in and talking to each other and like the whole sequence around that helicopter. And I was like, what if they bring a four-seater the next day? What do I do then, right? And I don't know if I should tell that story, but
Go ahead.
obviously, obviously they did almost bring a four-seater. And it's because I asked the question the night before and they finally sent me the actual model of the helicopter, that I had to go on Google and find out that it's a four-seater and then write the email back and be like,
Oh
hey,
my God.
that's a four-seater and we have 7 people that are supposed to be rescued. Are we going to choose who gets to live or die tomorrow? Like, and then
That's
rewrite the
changing
scene
the
around
story.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then rewrite this because it's the end of the story. So you could, in theory, make that, make that change, but it would make the movie a very different movie.
It's a much deeper movie than yeah, than
Yeah,
Earthquake. Yeah.
exactly. So, needless to say, if you've ever seen the film, it ends up being a seven-seater. But that had to happen, like,
Wait,
I
but
don't
you
know.
just had a feeling like, what if? And you were right.
Yeah, yeah. But it's one of those things where it's like, that's why I'm saying and I didn't freak out when they said, oh, when they sent me and I realized it was a four-seater. I was like, it's going to work itself out, if whether
Yeah.
they are able to like change the helicopter, it's going to be great. If they can't and it's a four-seater, I don't know, maybe I'll just, come up with the second, I'll just shoot tighter. I don't know, it's like,
Yeah.
and in the long shot, I'll try, I'll kind of shoot it from the front so you can't see how long it is. Like, there's always a way out. It's just not going to be as great as it could be, right? So I think a lot of the anxiety comes from like just wanting it to be perfect and
Yeah.
not being not realizing that not everything in life works that way. Even if you're a director, like I know some directors would be like, oh, that means I'm not like a legit director because I won't like kill myself over something. But like, what do you want me to do? To build a helicopter on the day? Like
Yeah. You
sometimes
have
you
to
just kind of
work with what the world presents you and the universe presents you. And sometimes you can come up with something better than what was scripted.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you survived that movie. I was looking at the credits. I saw that the editor was Ruben Saban.
Right. He was in my ear. Yeah.
So you got him on, you got him that job?
Yeah. I mean,
Nice.
Ruben, I think I did get him the job. I'm trying to remember exactly how it came to be. I mean, again, the same producers worked with Martin on his feature.
Oh yeah.
That was edited by Anders, another AFI grad.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah,
so
that Martin and Anders they've worked a lot together, right?
Martin and Anders came to AFI with like maybe a decade of working together before that. So
That's right. Do you
yeah.
remember their real day real?
Oh yeah, of course. It was one of them. The one. Do you remember that?
I remember it because it was one of the first times I like hosted that real day thing. And it was so that reel was so crazy and I loved it so much and it got such a reaction that I played it again at the very, very end of the night just
Right.
because
I
it was
know.
so
Yeah.
fun and it was just like blew the roof off the place. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such. I mean, I'll never forget that short. Frank Sinatra's.
Yes.
That's
That's
one of
life. That's like with the POV the whole time, and he's puking. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's one of those things like you can't find any flaw in it. It's just perfect.
it's just pure
Yeah.
joy and disgusting.
Every moment, every time I mean, I've rewatched it many times afterwards because like it's on Vimeo somewhere. Every time I watch it, I'm like, that's just such a treat. Um,
I love hearing like like I think people think that directors are directors don't collaborate with each other because it's there's usually one director on something,
yeah,
and so there's a competitive thing built into like a group of directors like that come out of a film school.
yeah,
But it sounds like you have a group of supportive directors that you're
yeah, we
friends with.
are. Yeah, totally. And I think, I mean, Casey Johnson is also a good friend, and I'm actually helping him now on his feature, and I'm helping with some visual effects.
Yeah, which
Um,
I saw the test screening of a couple weeks ago, and I you have a lot of work to do.
yeah, I missed that test screening, but I definitely know what is not there because it's like it's on
Yes.
in my hard drive now. Like, okay, that's waiting for me. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the other directors besides him are, well, I wanted to say that some of them are like international, and that might be something that bonds us. But no, we're also in touch with many American directors from our year. Most of my classes, at least the people that are still in LA, are very close and see each other every now and then.
Good.
Uh, yeah,
I
but
love
you're
it.
right about the whole kind of that sort of like detachment or the tendency of directors to kind of be in their own world a little bit.
Yeah.
See that, but I've always been more in line, I feel like Hollywood is big. There's room for everybody. You see the biggest directors are also kind of friends. You got I don't know, Christopher Nolan is a good friend of Denis Villeneuve, right? It's like
Yeah.
they talk to each other and like they show each other their films and stuff, and they're like competing in the same arena.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. They're competing for IMAX screens.
yeah, now they're exactly for IMAX screens. But they're good friends, and they got the what's it called, the Mexican
Oh yeah. You have Guillermo and
yeah,
Alejandro. Yeah. The three amigos.
yeah, the three
Yeah.
amigos
And then
who
back in the day, they called them the movie brats. It was Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, De
right.
Palma, Scorsese. Like,
Mhm.
would all like give each other notes on their early films and super supportive and trade
Yeah, and
scripts
run
and
bets on like this movie's gonna be great,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's how it should be. I mean, I don't see that if there's any like kind of animosity, it's all ego. It's just, there's no good reason for it. It's just, people thinking or fearing that like, oh, if this guy's gonna be successful, then it means I can't be successful. It's like that's bullshit. It's like,
yeah,
there's the chances of both of you being successful are small enough, but they exist, right? So it's like, sorry, the chances of any of you being successful are near zero. So you may as
yeah.
well,
They're very small. So yeah,
you know, you may as well just stay friends because at least you're gonna get that at the end. Like that's something uh you
yeah.
can
Well, so let's talk about for the last few years after that film. Well, let me ask you this, because if you did Earthquake and it did really well for Mar Vista, right?
it
Um,
did.
did you choose not to do other films? Were others offered to you?
No, I think one of I definitely expected to see more offers to make films after 10.0, especially based off of the success of 10.0. But there's a few things to keep in mind. One is that I'm not a, I don't have any points on the film. So as far as like what the film did after I've finished it, it's all kind of a big mystery to me. They didn't really
Right.
share that information with me. Mar Vista didn't, and also the producers of the film didn't. I don't know what they don't know or don't know about it. If whenever I ask, they say, "Oh, I don't know about anything about what's going on and stuff." The reason I'm saying it did well is because I do see something called foreign levies, which is um, some percentage of the profits of the film in some territories around the world. They're like the law requires that they pay it to the director, whether or not I have it on my contract, which I don't. So the only money that I ever see from that film is when it's being screened in some locations around the world. South America, some countries in Europe, and I do get a little bit of that. So I know that it's still in circulation, it's still being seen, it's still, producing some profits. And for a film that was made for that long ago to still be in circulation, and I'm still seeing, some money from it, it tells me that it's a pretty good film. The other indication that I got was that at AFM, that was kind of like the film had a big poster where AFM is the American film market, and that's where they Mar Vista had a big booth, and they made a big deal out of 10.0. Even though I think in terms of where I don't know what their plans were, but I definitely did not feel like this film was given any kind of special attention from the production standpoint.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so that's one thing. The other thing is this circumstantial? I think the producers and Mar Vista had a falling out after this film, or some kind of, I think any kind of plans of making more films together ended up disintegrating. So, um, and the producers were the people that I was more close to in that production, obviously, because I spent more time with them. So Mar Vista never reached out to me. Maybe they felt like they didn't want the producers to be involved. Maybe it's just they just don't do it. You just hire the producers and expect them to bring on the directors. And then my producers ended up kind of pivoting and doing more lifetime sort of movies that did not require visual effects. And yeah, I did get one or two offers to make films, but they were on a lower budget. And at the time, I felt like I didn't want to, go through the same type of experience again. I wanted my next film to be a little bigger. I didn't want it to be
Yeah.
kind of I felt like, I was in, I was just in the trenches, and I didn't want to go back to even deeper, mud and like harsher uh situations. So I was like, oh, I'll just wait. And you think you're gonna wait, and you you're gonna play the cards that are dealt or whatever, and they never actually um materialized into something that was bigger than 10.0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. But you've never had a lack of work in the visual effects world, right?
Yeah.
You were doing it when you were a fellow.
Yeah. So I
Uh,
mean, that's the thing. That's a blessing and maybe a curse too, right?
yeah.
So I was always always had enough projects and kind of opportunities to do visual effects on other people's projects to pay the bills, to justify, staying here in LA and still being surrounded by filmmakers, and it felt like it was a good trade-off in terms of, okay, well, if I'm not getting an opportunity to direct, at least I can be part of a project in that capacity. Um, yeah, I mean, so in that regard, it's been visual effects has definitely been my safety net for
Yeah.
many years. And then
I think it's great.
every now and then I would like basically say, okay, it's been a long time, I haven't directed. Let's shoot something. And I would kind of gather a few friends together, rent some material, put a little bit of money, and shoot a short film or something. Um, Oftentimes it's an opportunity to kind of both work on some material that I haven't worked before, and try out maybe some technologies or techniques in visual effects or filmmaking that I
Hmm.
haven't tried before. Um, so it kind of serves a dual purpose. It's like both creating some new work that I can show off, and maybe that can kind of again put myself on some people's radars, and also experiment with some new tools or techniques that I want to use maybe on other projects, even if it's just on a VFX supervisor capacity. And I don't often get to do that on other people's projects, and I'll use my own project as a some kind of a testing ground for those.
That's smart. That's really smart. To showcase what you can do in VFX, but kind of like you're incepting that you're a director because you directed the piece that they're looking at.
Yeah.
Um, and just
So
to keep that directing muscle, flexed every
exactly. Yeah.
so often. Because
Mhm.
like that's the key, like, right, is just to like survive, stay in the game, stay around the business. I'm sure you do quite well in visual effects, but don't like not give up on directing. I don't want to speak for you, but I assume that's still something that you want to do.
I do, yeah. And the more I find, the more I learn about is it really like? So the more I know about what it's really like, the actual day-to-day of being a director in some types of work, for instance, commercial directors, the more I get a sense of like, okay, whether I do or don't really want to do that. So for instance, for example, commercial directors spend a lot of time creating treatments for projects that never come through. And they pitch and pitch and pitch, and a lot of times uh they don't make it. Sometimes they pitch knowing that they're not going to make it. It's just to put their names,
Yeah.
for future work. So again, it's a lot of homework, a lot of pouring your guts and innards into like something that you really you're not going to end up actually making. And worse than that, you're actually going to see, you might see the product at the end of the day like 20 times a day if you watch TV or whatever, if it's a
Yeah.
big commercial. So not only are you not going to make it, you're going to have to watch it
Yeah.
in
What
front
you're
of you.
describing is the actor's life also.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Oh my God, actors, I feel so bad for actors. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a masochistic uh you know profession, I think. I mean, I
Oh
have
God, it's brutal. Yeah.
all my respect for actors, but it's such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
uh
So
yeah.
wait, so just quickly break down like what a visual effects supervisor does.
Okay. Basically, anytime a script calls up something that is not shootable for whatever reason, usually it's either safety, too expensive, or physically impossible. um Anytime that happens, someone comes up with a question. So how do we do that anyway, right? How do we get a horse to jump between two buildings without endangering a horse and a rider or whatever? Um, and then visual effects is obviously one of the possibilities to rely on for those things. And a visual effects supervisor is that person that should have all the know-how from A to Z of how should we prep for this? How should we actually shoot this? And how are we going to use technology later on by a team of artists to pull it together and to end up with the shot that we had in mind from the get-go. Um, so the way I see it, it's kind of like any other major collaborator on a set, like the DP, like the editor, like the writer, like the production designer, obviously the actors, and it's an extension of the director. The VFX supervisor should be basically, it's like a part of the brain of the director, should understand what the director's vision is as as well as possible. And if they don't, to empower the director with their own tools and techniques um, to collaborate and to communicate the director's vision. So like a lot of times as a visual effects supervisor, I'm telling a director, we should storyboard this because I know you have a vision, but just telling that, to me, there's a gap here where I might understand one thing when you mean something else, and I don't want there to be any gaps. I want it to be as clear as possible, so I can either I'll storyboard it, or sometimes I'll go into a 3D program, 3D software on a computer, and create something and show it to the director. Is that what you think? And more often than not, it usually is. It's usually the case where like I put something together, I'm like, I think that's what he means, and then I show it to the director and like, yep, you got it, right? Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes, and especially when it's something unrealistic or kind of, if it's a magical thing or if it's an alien, or you got to design a character, you got to design an
Right.
environment. That's when things can become a lot more amorphic and unclear, and that's where concept art and all of that comes into play. But it's really the VFX supervisor's role to um, both empower the director and extract from the director the information, and also relay that information over to the rest of the visual effects crew and to the film crew. I feel like a lot of times I feel like I'm standing between the director and the DP just because I recognize what questions they might have to each other that they haven't even asked each other. And I'm like, wait, you should ask this guy this question, or
Right.
you should ask him that question. I'm just here to facilitate to make sure that you guys are asking those questions. Um, Anyway, a good example is like a character getting hit by a truck, and obviously the truck is going to be added in CG. It's not going to be a real truck, but a real truck would cast a shadow on the actor.
Mm.
So has the DP thought about adding something called, kind of, you could add shadow in visual effects, but I, as a visual effects supervisor, know that adding a shadow is actually not as easy as people think. It's actually pretty hard. So like
Hmm.
it will help everybody if we had a practical shadow. So I'm going to talk to the DP and be like, we should have a shadow here.
Right.
And maybe that's an example where the director doesn't even need to know, or maybe the director does want to know. Maybe the director is going to block the scene somewhere else if he wants to utilize that as some kind of to some sort of storytelling effect. But a lot of times I'm the person on location scouts that looks at where the sun is and where it's going to be in the afternoon and how it's going to affect both what we're shooting and what we're not shooting. Because
Right.
if I'm going to add a big spaceship on the right and we're shooting in the afternoon, then the whole set should be now in shadow, but it's not because there's no real spaceship over there. So those are the kinds of things that a visual effects supervisor does on set, in prep, and then in post. It's all about just working with artists and seeing dailies, and when I say dailies, I don't mean necessarily footage shot on the day on production, which is also something that I do, but I'm talking about new versions of visual effects shots, as they're being put together. So sometimes it's things that I wouldn't even show the director because they're not ready, they're not baked. Um, but I can give notes on them and sort of make sure that they are shaping up to in the right direction. And again, it's all about me understanding what the director wants and basically kind of representing the director in every, in every twist and turn.
Right. I assume that you must be a very valuable visual effects supervisor because you have that director mind, you have a director background. And so, like, there's visual effects supervisors that would just know the technical part of it, but the storytelling part of it.
Yeah, and I was surprised to find out that there are a lot of visual effects supervisors that don't have a lot of on-set experience because they do come from the department. They kind of went up the ranks in a visual effects house or studio, and haven't had a lot of time on set. The reason it's surprising to me is because being from Israel and it's a small country, we don't even have visual effects studios really. We just have people doing visual effects, and a lot of them are just like me, people who were also on set and doing everything. So it's a lot more common where I'm from originally, like to that people are just kind of generalists and they've always had their all hands on decks or like kind of involved in everything, a little bit of everything. So being a little bit of everything is perfect for a visual effects supervisor because you have that background. But but um being from but when I arrived here, I ended up kind of joining a VFX house. I was like, oh, okay. I realized that this experience that I have is not necessarily you know, the shared thing that everybody else has. So
Yeah. What are some of the misconceptions? I think there's a lot of people think because visual effects are everywhere now, right? It's like everything has visual effects.
oh yeah.
Or people think that you can just shoot whatever you want and then hand it over to someone like yourself and say, add a dinosaur or whatever, fix this. But talk about some of the misconceptions and the proper way to do it, like as far as thinking about it in pre-production, because you probably can do anything, right? It's just
Yeah.
they cost more money.
Time and money, right?
Yeah.
Um yeah, the way I think about it, it's not so much a misconception as it is misutilization, I think. Misallocation of resources. And I don't know, again, to me, because of my cultural sort of background, I always think that it's wiser to use all the parts of a buffalo instead of just being wasteful and throwing money out the door for no good reason.
Hmm.
And I just see a lot of it happening in bigger films where, like you say, people are shooting left and right. They don't care. They don't prep. They just say, well, we're just gonna put a big spaceship in the background, and someone in post is gonna take care of it.
Oh,
And a lot of times that results in a lot of added work that otherwise wouldn't be necessary. So it's really it's an attitude issue, I think, more than a misconception. It's like
Yeah.
we know that visual effects can do everything, so why don't we just have visual effects do everything?
Yeah. Why don't, yeah, exactly. That's interesting. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, because it's way too expensive and you could spend all that time, you could spend that money making five other films that could be, or smaller films. That's the thing, right? It's like a lot of filmmakers now they are saying, let's not make, five 200 million films. Let's make, 220, 5 million films, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that guy, Cord Jefferson, who wrote American Fiction, his speech at the Academy Awards
yeah.
was that. And I was like standing up cheering that. I was like, yes, make 10, $20 million movies and take chances and you'll discover some new IP that you can make sequels to.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
actually takes me all the way back to my thesis film because that was my attitude towards making a big VFX thesis was that if I could make five, small home brewed dramas for the same, effort and money as I could this, 1 20-minute space opera extravaganza, why do I have to set it in space? Like a good story can be told anywhere. In fact, a probably better story can be told in like, an apartment, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, so that same kind of attitude. And I ended up doing, the space opera anyway, but
But the attitude was there. Wait, does that ever happen to you like on set and you guys are trying to figure out how you're going to pull off a VFX, whatever, a digital visual effect and you and you go, well, we could do this practically if you just did this. I feel like people have
Mhm.
forgotten the fun tricks of practical filmmaking.
Oh yeah, in Europe, in my thesis, in my feature film in 10.0, there was not a single green screen, like phone or iPad or whatever. I would
Yeah.
rather spend another half hour, an hour at the end of the last days, the last day or whatever, the previous night, to create something really quick on the computer so I can put it on the screen and actually shoot something for real
Yeah.
than worry about green screens because that's just money wasted and it's like time that I'm gonna have to think about it later and I'm no longer like and then the actors got to like react to whatever to pretend that they're seeing something that's not there. I always
Yeah.
thought it made no sense from an directing actor's point of view and also like it's a freaking map on a phone. Like we know what it looks like, right? So it's like
Honestly, that stuff drives me crazy because I can always tell, and I'm like, why didn't you just put it on there? It doesn't look exactly right. The actor can react to it, like you said. It also, I mean, I understand this part because it sometimes just like it's the practicality of it could be a million factors, but like driving shots that are either green screen or now
yeah.
with LED screens, I'm like, you couldn't just have someone holding a camera while the actor drove. And I know there are SAG rules and things like that, but I'll take
No,
authenticity any day,
me
over
too.
that.
And the same thing. I had a lot of driving shots, everything practical. I had not a single green screen driving
Good.
in my film. I knew that I was gonna need every cent that I can afford on the other VFX stuff. So I was like, I'm not gonna like waste, good money that I could use on the bigger things on like this green screen thing. It's like just makes no sense. Um, trying to think, well, when I like listen to other VFX supervisors talk about how they do things, and there's something that I feel like is uh kind of unanimous around at least the VFX supervisor that I respect, which is the thought process behind the way they approach deciding what to do in visual effects or not is always it starts with what can we do practically, everything that we can do practically, let's do practically, and let's just and that's why when people come to me with visual effect, like, can you read this scene and let me know how much it's going to cost to do the visual effects? And I'm like, tell me what you're going to do for real. Like, I want to know how much of this can we actually do for real.
Yeah.
And then once I know everything you can do and will do, I want to know where the buck stops with the reality. And that's when I start. I don't want to start a second too early because I don't want to waste any money. And also, I think when you shoot something for real, it looks real. There's no like tinkering and figuring out. It's like it's real. That's one thing I really liked about the TV show that was on 911, which is like they were very, very traditional in their approach to everything, and especially to practical effects and stunts and all of that. They
Yeah,
did. I don't know how many shows do that, but like when a car flips on 911, a car flips on in reality. They shoot a real car flipping. There's no. I've never done a single CG car flipping for that show, and there's a lot of flipping on that show. Um,
that's great. That's good
the
to hear
closest
that.
thing we do, so the things that I like to kind of help them with, and that's we did a lot of that is like, so in order to flip a car, they're not going to flip a full, heavy car. So they got out some of the stuff from the car, like they'll got out like the engine or the fuel tank and stuff. So when you see the bottom of the car, you see a bunch of stuff missing. We just put that stuff back in. That's it,
Ah,
you
I didn't
know?
know that. Okay, cool.
So we see a car flipping a lot of times. If they show it from that angle, a lot of times we get a shot that looks perfectly real, and it is, it's like a car really got flipped and everything, and whatever pyrotechnics, explosion, or water spray or whatever caused the car to flip. It's a crazy show. So there's like way too many weird reasons for cars to flip on that show, but they do flip. And yeah, and so a lot of the work on 911 is really invisible. It's like, well, the car flipped for real, but the engine underneath is had to be added because for safety reasons, it wasn't there on the day.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's my favorite kind of effects. They're the kind of invisible ones that are enhancing practical effects.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And by the way, those things there's a little funny dynamic there where on set, they always tell me, oh, it's going to be fully 100% practical. You're just going to have to remove the cables or whatever, right? And then in post, they're like, there's an engine missing from that car. It's like, but it's like an afterthought. They have to see it, somewhere in the editing room, like watch it in replay like 5 times. They're like,
Yeah.
oops,
And they're like,
oops,
oh yeah,
there's
this
no
looks
engine.
weird.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta start wrapping it up because you've been very generous with your time. But I gotta, because you are the visual effects expert, so I'm gonna do some rapid fire. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What earliest age, first movie you saw with visual effects that kind of blew your mind?
Jurassic Park, of course.
That's the concept. Okay.
It
Okay.
is. Well, I mean, the first movie that blew my mind with visual effects.
No, that's the right answer, Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park is the one that blew my mind. And I was like, from that moment on, I was like, okay, this is it. It's like,
Was that one of the Touchstone movies where you're like, I want to do that?
I think
Not
that's
necessarily visual effects, but like movies.
movies. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
I, because it came out, I think over the summer in the U.S., and I was in the U.S. when it came out, so I saw all the hype around it. But my uncle and I have younger cousins wouldn't allow me to go watch it. So I had to wait about 6 months before it arrived to Israel, where I was able to kind of drag my mom and like my neighbor or something like that to watch it. So I had 6 months of like, after all the hype, like living through the whole hype and like posters everywhere and like, whatever about the film before I actually saw it. So it was also a very uh teasing kind of period. It was like, took a long time for me to watch it.
Because you're hearing about it, the buzz. I'm sure friends were talking
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's hard.
Oh, okay. The worst visual effects in a movie you've seen in like a modern movie where there shouldn't be an excuse.
Ooh. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is I believe it's but it's like famously worse. So I don't know if it's like cheating because it's not something that I personally noticed. It's just like the kind of well-known bad VFX is The Rock's character in The Mummy. I don't know if you remember. I think it was the first Mummy or whatever. He was like a Scorpion King or something, right?
Yeah, Scorpion King. Yeah.
Scorpion King. That was the name, right? Name of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently, I mean, people always love to diss on that visual effects because it just looks so CG.
Yeah.
Um, I'll tell you what my pet peeve is, or
Yeah. Okay.
it's it's when human beings or any kind of organic character creature does something that is just doesn't feel physically possible. It's like Orlando Bloom in, I don't know, is it like jumping in The Hobbit or
Oh,
in Lord of the Rings or something like that.
yeah. No, it was in the sequel ones, The Hobbit. Yeah. It
Yeah, The
was
Hobbit.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you
it
watch
was
it and you're
beyond
like,
video game. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, and it's everything else about that shot is perfect. Like the lighting and the character, it looks super real, but like the way it moves, I can't buy it. It's like that. So that's something that always takes me out of movies. When that happens, when I notice like animation that just doesn't isn't grounded in physical reality. And that's a big problem, by the way, that a lot of filmmakers and a lot of films run into because once the scene is not relying on stunts, you don't have that process of like, let's test that and see how far can a person jump from point
Oh
A to
yeah.
point B, right? So like if a stunt person would have to do it, they would mock it up in some kind of, in their hangar or whatever in the back lot and like put some pillows or whatever, some jump from here to there and see how far they can take it before it like becomes too dangerous and then be like, okay, this is our stunt, right? You like it? Okay, it's rooted in reality because someone has to do it for real. But when it comes to visual effects, they're like, oh, let's put a cliff here and a thing here, and the character goes from here to here, and you have three 3 seconds of screen time to accomplish that move and you're like, well, a person doesn't move that fast or whatever. Like a jump can't reach that far. And you only find out about it in post because you're locked into that vision. And we had situations like that on 911 too, where it's like I read it on the script and I'm like thinking, is that even going to work out in physical like reality? The problem is like there's really no way, or there is no time sometimes on this on TV at least, to test and kind of and disprove it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. You got to just those production schedule, TV production schedules are fast, fast, fast.
yeah.
Okay. And the last one, like the most recent movie that kind of just blew your mind with visual effects. You're like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible.
Whoa, it's hard. It's hard to really blow somebody's minds nowadays because
I
it's like
know. I
almost
know.
everything possible.
Or you didn't even know it was visual effects, right? That's another mind-blowing thing, right?
Oh yeah. Well, the most recent film that I watched in period was Dune 2, and Dune 2 had some incredible visuals. One of the things that I liked about it was how, in terms of visual effects, I really admired the restraint in the filmmaking.
Yeah.
It wasn't shot like a film that had all that budget to do visual effects. It was shot like a film that was shot the way they wanted to shoot it. It's kind of like it's just its own thing, and that's something I really respected. Creator, the creator, I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That film was just really beautiful because they shot everything on locations and they went to really great locations and the approach there was that they spent less money on building big sets, more on finding really cool locations and shooting in really interesting times of day. Lighting, lighting wise, they shot a lot of it natural light, and very minimal. The whole crew was very minimal, so they were very smart about how to get as much production value into the screen in reality, without going super big in terms of the production scale. So I really like the result. You watch the movie and you're like, this is just a beautiful film, and the nature is beautiful, and then the visual effects on top of that is great. But it's because it's all, the environment, you know the nature is real.
Yeah.
The scenery, I mean, is real. Um, so that was a really interesting kind of departure from what I normally see in movies.
Yeah.
So I want
Yeah.
to
It's
see.
interesting. Yeah. You really feel it. You feel like they're not green screening anything. Like they're there, and then
Yeah,
they enhanced, like they turned half of that kid's head into a robot head, and you're
yeah.
like,
And a movie like that is a movie that really kind of, it, inspires me as a filmmaker to like be like, I, you know, of course they had $80 million to make that film, which is actually not that much for a film on that scale,
right.
Um, considering it's like so many robots and space vehicles and it's all futuristic. It's like, for that to be $80 million is quite an achievement on its own. And they did that because they kind of kept a small footprint on the production side. But it kind of makes you think, well, of course I'm not going to make the creator, but if I took a similar approach, I could get a lot, out of just choosing right locations and shooting in interesting time of day and using the FX. I have an FX30, which is they shot the film with an
Yeah,
FX.
that's right. It's like a consumer camera, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I have like the the that's the full frame sensor on the FX3, and I have the same body but like a semi full frame, whatever. Like I don't know what's the other called, but smaller frame. Whatever. It's
Sounds
like
it sounds close enough. So there's no excuse, David.
yeah, it's not. Nobody's gonna be like, that's a FX30, not an FX1, you know.
Ultimately,
But
nobody cares what camera you shoot it on. It's just like,
yeah,
what's the result, right?
yeah. So I think that's really the next breakthrough is movies like The Creator or the new Godzilla minus one, which I haven't seen, but
Mm.
they won the Academy Award for best VFX, even though from what I've seen and from what I've heard, it's not they didn't win because the visual effects were like better than the rest. They won because the visual effects were made by 30 people in like less than a year, and the whole
Yeah,
production budget was like 18 million, which is like nothing for a Godzilla movie.
yeah,
I think that's the next breakthrough. It's like not making things that we haven't seen before, but doing things that we haven't seen before for much less.
yeah,
And I think that's the important thing, because if you can get there, you can kind of scale down the cost of visual effects or do it more efficiently. More people can tell more stories. It just comes
yeah,
down to, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You keep going back to that, and honestly, like it's like yeah, that's the Academy Award for the best visual effects. But I think a lot of it was because it was integrated into a really well told story, like a
yeah.
heartfelt story.
So I hear, yeah.
That wasn't
Uh,
just about Godzilla. It was about the people there. And I think that's, you know, I mean, honestly, like, yeah, I'm glad you ended on that one because for you specifically, who you are a director, that hopefully is the most inspiring because that director background is visual effects supervisor.
yeah, and
And
he supervised his own film, which
yeah,
is,
so let that be the fire under your ass, my friend.
thank you. Yeah.
It's
That's
just, I mean, I assume that it's the writing the writing part, or finding the material, right?
mhm, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna be on a mission to try to find you something
Thank you. Yeah.
because I'm around all these young writers, and if
100%.
there's
Yeah.
something that's like producible, low budget, let's get you back in that director's chair.
100%. Yeah. I'm all eyes reading. That's me. Like just eyes. Imagine me as like one big eye just reading scripts all the time. Yeah. On the
There's
lookout.
a visual effect I want to see, just you as one giant eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need two eyes to read a script. Just one eye is enough.
Cool,
Yeah.
man. Well, I thank you for all this time. So much more to talk about, but we'll have to do another one.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna drag you into AFI to do a workshop one of these
With
days.
pleasure. I love talking to students and stuff. And I'm always
Cool. And I'll see you around the neighborhood.
yeah, of course, yeah. Go to Aroma or something. And,
Yeah, right. That's like the industry spot. We'll meet up
yeah.
there.
All
Cool,
right.
man.
Bye,
Good to
man.
see you. Be
Yeah.
well. Take care. Bye.